Every day, trillions of dollars move through the global financial markets. To an outside observer, these movements seem entirely chaotic, a storm of buying and selling with no discernible pattern. But what if that chaos is just an illusion? What if, hiding in plain sight, there's a script that the market follows, a predictable sequence of events that repeats itself over and over again? It turns out, price movement is often not random at all. It's a structured response, a logical reaction to very specific conditions. This is the market's hidden architecture. At TRADEVERSE, we unpack these hidden dynamics. And to understand this script, you first have to understand the two forces that write it, liquidity and imbalance. The story always begins with the cause, not the effect. So we don't start with a sudden price jump. No, we start with a hunt. You see, large institutions need huge amounts of volume to execute their trades. To find it, they'll often drive prices toward levels where they know other traders have placed their stop-loss orders. This is called a liquidity sweep. It's a deliberate action that traps one side of the market and, well, that's what sets the stage for a very powerful move in the opposite direction. This move is aggressive, like a sudden, violent force. But that kind of force is rarely efficient. It shoves the price so far, so fast, that it leaves a kind of vacuum in its wake. This vacuum, this imbalance, creates a natural pull, almost like gravity, suggesting the price needs to drift back and revisit the area it just abandoned. And this whole process, the hunt, the aggressive move, the vacuum, it leaves behind a very distinct fingerprint on the chart. It's the evidence that tells us what just happened. We call this fingerprint a market imbalance, or sometimes a fair value gap. It's really just a picture of that inefficiency. It's a zone where one side of the market was so overwhelmingly aggressive that the other side barely had a chance to get involved. And here is how you spot it. First, you get a strong, powerful candle, usually right after that liquidity event we talked about. Second, the very next candle doesn't really pull back into the first one, and that creates the third piece, a visible gap on the chart between the first candle and the third one. That's your imbalance. Now, it's crucial to understand this isn't just some leftover artifact on a chart. For all practical purposes, it acts as a magnet for future price. The market has a memory, and it has a tendency to resolve these kinds of inefficiencies. It wants to go back and finish the business that was left undone. So, let's move from theory to reality. Here's this exact principle playing out in one of the world's most active markets, the euro versus the US dollar. Looking at this 1-hour chart, you can see the price first dip down to the 1.0850 level. That was the hunt, a classic liquidity sweep, designed to trigger the stops of anyone who is already betting on a price rise. And right after that sweep, what happens? An incredibly aggressive move up. And it left behind the exact signature we're looking for, a clean imbalance zone, right there between 1.0870 and 1.0885. From there, the script played out almost perfectly. Just a few hours later, price was drawn back down like a magnet, and it retraced right into that imbalance zone. Once that inefficient area was filled, the market was balanced again, and the original uptrend resumed, this time with force. But this return trip, it isn't always so immediate. In this next example, with the British pound, the return took a little longer. The principle, however, held firm. In this case, a really powerful move to the downside created a major fair value gap. That area you see between 1.2810 and 1.2830, that was a pocket of intense selling pressure, with almost no buyers present. Now, the market didn't snap back right away. Instead, it waited. 2 days later, it was drawn back up, re-entering that exact zone. And once that old business was settled and the imbalance was resolved, the original downtrend continued. The gap did its job. So, once you learn to see this pattern, you can start to move from just observing the market to actually reading its story as it unfolds. It gives you a framework for interpretation. The approach becomes a logical sequence. You start by identifying the cause, that hunt for liquidity. Then you mark the evidence it leaves behind, the gap. The most critical part is patience. You wait for the market to be drawn back to that zone. Only then can you anticipate the story's resolution, which is often a continuation of that first powerful move. And that's the complete cycle. That's the script. A hunt for liquidity sets up an aggressive move. That move creates an imbalance, and that imbalance requires a correction. It is a simple, elegant story of action and reaction. So in the end, the market isn't just a random series of price ticks. It's a narrative. And while no script is perfect, understanding these core elements, this constant dance between liquidity and imbalance, gives you a map. It helps you find order in what would otherwise just be chaos.